Good morning, everybody. Even though it sort of looks like dusk and evening here, it's kind of gloomy and cloudy and foggy, but we have bright, sunshiny yellow walls. So hopefully that is brightening wherever you are as well. This week, we're going to start a new theme, inversions, which might be a little intimidating for some people and super exciting for other people. There's probably a big range there. We're going to take a pretty step-by-step approach to it so that there are like points along the way. For some people, balancing on your upper back and shoulders or your head is maybe not so great. Maybe you've got some osteoporosis and you're trying to avoid that. So we're just going to look at all the different ways inversions can exist. And then some of the ways to go into them in really healthy, with healthy strength and alignment. And then also alternatives, right? Like what are the modifications to give you a little bit of that anti-gravity experience, which is really good for your body. I feel like that might be Scott's wheelhouse to talk about those things a little more. But basically anything where you just make the blood flow go the opposite direction could be considered inversions. So one really basic inversion that I like is to just lie on your back and put your legs up on the wall and just let all the blood flow out of your feet and down into your pelvis. You could think of that as inverting. And then I mentioned downward dog, getting the torso to be upside down and let everything kind of flow the other direction, an inversion as well. And then, of course, like a handstand is an inversion if you wanted to go that far, which I kind of like doing those things. I find those things really fun. So, all to say that we're going to start down that path today. And we thought it would be good to look at the upper back. So something like a shoulder stand, which the beginning of a shoulder stand is a shoulder bridge. But that sort of feeling, like we really want the upper back to be super open. So I have a nice wide area to balance on. And then in order for that to happen, for me to balance on an upper back wide area, I need to also be pretty bendable at the vertebra right below. If my spine's really stiff, I'm not going to be able to get my pelvis up over my shoulders and balance. Once I find this upper curl and opening the back, if I'm bending enough in the spine, I'll be able to get my pelvis up over my hips. You don't have to do this with me, but if my spine's pretty flat, right, I can't quite get up. But the more my spine's able to bend and I can open my back, the more I'll be able to balance up there without having to like really stiff straight back, put all the pressure on my neck. So it's one of the reasons Scott and I both have kind of shifted a little more. Now, Pilates pretty much always wants you to invert in that way, but some of the yoga poses ask you to be really up high on the shoulders and kind of lock the chin to the chest. And both of us have kind of shifted more towards that Pilates version where you're really opening the upper back a little more, bending the spine, which is good for it, and then also balancing in that upper back place. This is much less pressure on the neck. It's much less like constriction in the breath. And that's good for the spine because you have to bend it. So that is my spiel for the moment. Pilates gives you a lot of opportunity to open that up. So let's actually start sitting, however is comfortable for you to sit, on a chair, on a blanket, on the floor. Find the place where you're not having to like fight your hips and grab so much in your hips, because when your hips grab, it's really hard to bend in this upper abdominal place because of your psoas muscle, if you know that muscle. When the hips are grabbing, the psoas is grabbing, and that gets stiff all the way into your mid-back. That stiffness goes all the way into your mid-back. So I want the hips to be able to feel pretty relaxed, however that is, so that we can get some of that upper abdominal curl. So then once you're there sitting up, gently sitting tall, right? Like lining everything up, but not gripping. And then let's take a small spine stretch type movement. You could also think of this as doing the mini crunch upright. So I'm not trying to bend very far forward. I'm trying to feel head, neck, and upper back open, but not bend from my mid back down to my tailbone, keeping all that just neutral, just as it is. And then rolling back up through your spine. And then the next time you do it, a little more internal focus. Just draw it in a little more. Head, first neck vertebra, second, third, fourth neck vertebra. And then notice if you feel your chin right against your chest, you've taken your head too low. So make sure there's still some space between your chin and your chest. And then let the upper ribs start to move, that part of the spine, bending in the space between your shoulder blades. And then once you hit that moment where you feel like the bottom of the shoulder blade, sort of that area, has a little bit of openness, you've bent that low through the vertebra, that's as far as you go. Think of the ribs drawing together in the front, navel comes in towards your spine, lower belly widens out. And then imagine that the shoulder blades fall wide along the back. They just sort of like cascade over the outside of the ribs. Your arms just easily falling forward or resting on your thighs or on the floor. Breathe into that space in your back. Do you still have space between your chin and your chest? So you're supporting the weight of your head, not letting it hang. And rolling back up. We'll play with that image one more time. Upper part of the neck opening. Soften your chest. Open the back. Vertebra by vertebra, about halfway through the rib cage vertebra. And then upper abdominals, rib connect in the front. Navel, wide lower belly. Drawing in. Shoulder blades flow out over the sides of the ribs. And then back up. Now, while we're here, let's do just a little bit of twisting, even though the movement we're looking at is in this forward plane. Anytime you complement with some of the other movements of the spine, it often, when you go back, you'll be able to do that first movement a little better. So the more ranges you get, the more things kind of loosen up. So let's rotate a little bit. So twisting around, really soft, easy, to one side, to the right. Let the neck relax as you turn. Let your chest relax, your upper back open. And breathe through your upper back here. Back to center, and then taking that the other way. Easy head, neck rotate, rib cage rotates, collarbones rotate. Upper back really broad. And then coming back to center. Turn to the side. And then we're going to work your way into that curl, into that mini crunch version of the curl. So I'm going to have my feet a little separated. I think that makes it easier to get your back to open. So feet are hip distance and flexed a little bit. And then as I try to bend the spine, I'll often talk about how there's kind of two ways you might thinking about bending the spine. One is the forward bend of the spine. And then another is kind of this way you feel the shoulder blades wrap around the spine, right? This version. And this version right here, where I let my shoulder blades kind of pull forward and wrap around, I haven't actually changed my spine at all, but it sort of feels round when I do that. And then if I leave my shoulders in place and just bend my spine, right? That's very specific, very isolated, but it doesn't feel quite as round. There's a little bit of both. The shoulder blades get a little wider, which lets me round my spine a little more. So I feel a little bit of that shoulder blades widening and pulling forward, but I want to make sure I'm also bending my spine as I do that. And once you think you have that, rolling back a little bit, holding on to the legs, and then just notice if your chest is super grippy, you're probably doing a little too much of the shoulder blade. Let them come back a little bit, not all the way, but a little bit. And think of softening the chest. And then slowly working your way down so that the pelvis is down, the lower part of the ribs are down, and just before the tips of your shoulder blades touch the floor, that's where you're going to pause. And that same thing, nice soft chest, open back of the neck, just like when you were sitting, chin and chest has a little bit of space. Shoulder blades are gliding around, elbows are a little lifted to help you do that. And then from here, we're going to come back up. All the way back to sitting. I went pretty low so I could feel that really clearly, but you might find it's so hard to get up if you go that low, so you don't have to necessarily if you can just visualize that open space in the upper back. We're going to do it a couple times. So you bend in the sagittal forward plane. You let the shoulder blades wrap around the back, and then slowly take your walk down, leaving some space between the chin and the chest. Maybe halfway down is the place for you. Maybe all the way down still feels okay. Let me take a couple breaths. And then keeping all that as you come up. Let's do it one more time. And then this time, instead of coming back up, we'll go all the way down. Bend your knees so your feet can be flat. And then for a few breaths on your back, take your breath. See if you can move it through the back, through the armpits, maybe a little bit through the nice soft neck muscles. Now let's start to explore what it's like to balance in that space we've just made, right? We made it sitting up, we made it in a more sort of strength place in that last one. As we go into shoulder bridge, all that space you made by widening the shoulder blades, by softening the chest and bending through the lower ribs, now you have a nice wide base to balance on. So we're going to try it with arms to the ceiling because that's going to give me the most sort of space through there. Easiest way to find space through there. Pelvis may not come quite as high when your arms are to the ceiling. It's okay. It's normal. So see if you can feel your spine in between your shoulder blades, just gently towards the mat. For some people, that happens really easily, really naturally. For other people, maybe you don't feel a lot of sensation in the upper back, but just gently let it start to fall, however it is for you. And then we'll start with the pelvis rolling up. And as your pelvis gets a little higher, it's like you kind of dump the sand, right? Like let the rain stick fall towards your chest. If your torso was a rain stick and you tipped it pelvis up, you'd let everything fall towards the open space in the chest. And then rolling back down through your spine. Now, if you're like me, you might have felt a lot of hamstring when you did it that way. That goes back to that psoas muscle again. When I get the bend through the ribs really nicely, it creates a little more sort of soft foundation of the psoas. The psoas gets a little longer, and then my hamstrings can really fire to lift my pelvis, and the front of my hips can open more easily. So if that happens again, maybe don't lift your hips so high if it feels like your hamstrings are going to cramp. It's not unusual. It's not a sign that you're doing it wrong necessarily. Just don't lift your pelvis quite as high and keep focused on this upper back a little open. And letting everything fall to the upper back, easy neck, easy jaw, soft chest, wide shoulder blades. Right, here's my inversion. Pelvis higher than the head. Starting that inversion. Rolling back down. One more time, coming up together. Now this time as you're up there and you have that nice open space in your upper back, space between your chin and your chest, soft chest, all that stuff, can you keep all that as you lower your arms to the floor? And then as your arms are on the floor, sometimes it's helpful in allowing the pelvis to come up a little more once the arms are down. But see if you can stay with that open, broad shoulder blade feeling, broad upper back feeling, soft chest feeling. And then rolling back down. And stretch your legs out. And then one knee into your chest, roll up to sitting. Okay, so remember I was talking about sometimes the best way to get flexion is to do the other movements in the spine. So we did some rotation. We're going to play a little bit with lateral flexion. We're going to introduce it the same way we introduced this. So sitting on a chair or on a blanket, however you want to sit, let's take hands behind your head. Now I have my elbows a little forward of my shoulder joint so that my shoulder blade stays wide. The more the elbows go back, the more the blades come together and the more the chest pushes forward, and I lose some of that space. So even though in your life you may have worked with a wide elbow position and thinking about pulling the elbows back, for this, let's keep the chest soft and the back open by having the elbows a little forward. And then we're going to think lateral flexion, which is side bending, but that same one vertebra at a time through the neck, through the upper back, but not necessarily down into the waist and the pelvis. Now you might look at me and think her waist is bent. It might be a little bit, but it's not so much my thought. My thought actually is lifted up through there. And then coming back to center. Sometimes I like to think of a kitchen timer. with the analog sort of twisty dial. I put that right here, and then I turn the dial, keeping the chest soft. We had one of those kitchen timers for my whole childhood. I remember just cranking that around. I think of that exact kitchen timer right on my chest. And back to center. Playing with that a couple times. And then back to sitting. Okay, so we're going to try that in a little more strength-focused way by lying on your side. So let's come on to, I'm going to come on to my left side, which would be your right side if you're facing me. I'm going to take you take your right arm all the way flat so your head can drop. Now you could do that like this if this is better, but I think this next exercise will be a little easier if your arm's out, if your shoulder will tolerate that. And then just starting neutral, right? Like just letting everything be relaxed through here. You're going to have your hand on the floor in front of you. And then that same dial, head lengthens out, pushing with the left hand, maybe a little bit pushing with the right hand to come into that lateral flexion feeling. And then lowering it down. So my arm's definitely working here. My one hand can press down, both hands can press down into the floor. But I'm really thinking spine, head, neck, turn the dial on the chest. Exhale. I get some side obliques going. And then back down. Now you might be a little lower as you do yours. That's just fine. Maybe you come to here and relax into it and open your back. And back down. Or maybe you're feeling that as you turn your abdominals on, you can come up a little higher. One more time. And then relaxing all that. Now, since we're here, we're going to play a little bit with that position being how you hold your head up in side kicks, right? So a lot of times in side kicks, what we find is everybody just kind of holds their head up by bending their neck and grabbing their shoulder. What if you turned that dial, pressed into your top hand, created a little bit of length and a little bit of that bend? Now, if it doesn't work for you, it still is stuck in your neck, then rest your head down on the floor again. Either way, we're going to think open upper back, ribs connected in the front, soft chest, and a couple times forward and back with the leg. I'm not taking my leg quite as far forward and back as I might normally because I'm just a little more focused here today. And that works just fine. Often when I change my focus, it shifts other things about the exercise too. It's fine. Sometimes you get like a really super sweet tomato, and sometimes you get a tomato that's a little less sweet, or a little more tart, right? Side kicks, same way. Sometimes you have a big old kick in side kicks, and sometimes it's small. It's good for you either way. And relax all that. Okay, let's see if we can get through the other side. So lying on your left side, left arm all the way out. I have my feet a little forward. That creates just a little, takes some of the balance concern out of it. When my legs are straight along the mat, it becomes pretty precarious, and sometimes that makes it harder to get some of this upper back stuff moving. So kitchen timer on your chest, pressing your right hand down, lengthening the head and neck out, and then turn the dial on the timer as you press your hand. And then back down through your spine. And inhale. Exhale, soft chest. Two more. Maybe you notice your top hip gripping or that top leg wanting to lift. Sometimes that happens. We want the obliques to do it, not the thigh. So obliques on both sides working so that you can keep the top leg from trying to do it. Last one, if it works for you, bring your head up on your elbow. Turn your dial on your chest, long back of the neck, top leg lifted, and forward a little bit, and back a little bit. Upper back really open, chest soft, ribs connected. If your head's down, same focus. Still going to be super beneficial. One more. And then bring it all together. Okay, so let's just kind of test it out in one more plane of motion, and that's the sort of cat-cow position. So coming up onto your hands and knees, find what feels like neutral in your spine, head to tail, elbows a tiny bit soft. And as they go a tiny bit soft, they point more towards the sides of the room. As that happens, your shoulder blades widen more easily. That space in between your shoulder blades, that part of the spine in between your shoulder blades, like it floats up. And then soft chest, whole spine gets to bend. Feel how your upper back opens, your low ribs draw in, your head and neck can be long and relaxed. Here, my head is inverted, right? I get that feeling. Letting the neck release and the head be upside down. Back to neutral. And then let's take that last motion of the spine we haven't done, extension, letting your chest open. Back to neutral. In between the shoulder blades, that part of the spine opens, chest soft, shoulder blades wide. Let the neck and the head fully release. Back into neutral. Open the front of the chest. One more time. And then coming back to child's pose if you like, or coming back to sitting. I'm going to pass off to Scott, see where he takes us. I surprised him. I don't think he thought it was time yet. I'm 1 minute early. Occasionally that happens.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to my knees. First, you could just see me kind of mid-range. So I really enjoyed that work with the spine and mobilizing in the various directions, and especially the side bending. It's a place where so many of us get really locked up, is the mobility of the spine going side to side. And so working with the flexion and then working with the twisting was such a logical lead into the side bending. So I came down on my knees thinking I was still in the camera so you could see my face. I'm going to come back up on my feet. So let's take a look at some of the ideas that may flow a little bit more from yoga in terms of the side bending. So begin on your feet, little soft bend on your knee in your knees so that you can feel your feet. And then to facilitate freeing up the rib cage, slightly lengthen and deepen your breath. And let the breathing naturally move your rib cage. So with the exhale, ribs move down. With the inhale, the ribs lift and expand. So symptomatic of the upper back being kind of sticky or stuck is that with the inhale, the rib cage moves forward instead of opening up. So to help work with that with the exhale, take those lower ribs down, keep those lower ribs down. And then as you inhale, lift your upper ribs. Use the exhale to knit your lower ribs. Keep them knit. With the inhale, lift your upper ribs. So the idea here is to put more space between your adjacent ribs. Exhale, lower ribs stay down. Inhale, lift your upper ribs. By freeing up the ribs, putting more space between adjacent ribs, ribs connect the spine. Such that using your breath, you can mobilize your upper back. All right. So then bring your arms forward. Remember how Collette talked about opening your upper back? And with the exhale, arms up. Same breathing. Same space across your upper back. And now creating a little bit of space in your side ribs. And then come on down. So maybe you can see the skeletons, mother and child. And maybe you can see how the rib cage wraps around the whole body. Front, sides, back. Exhale. Connect your lower ribs to your belly. Inhale. Fill the rib cage circumferentially. Mobilize your whole rib cage. Now, in a sense, with my arms down, there's a little bit of restriction on my ribs. So with the next exhale, let's get those arms out of the way of the rib cage. Then your kitchen timer. Turn the dial to your right. Couple breaths. Turn the dial back to noon, to your left. Turn the dial back to starting point and arms down. Now let's work with a little bit more rotation. Step your feet wide apart. Turn your left foot in, then your right foot out. Exhale, bend. Inhale, straighten. Up and down like that. So you might be wondering, what's the mobility of the upper back? Where's the side bend? Where's the rotation? We're not quite there yet. Let's do a few more, mobilizing ankle, hip, and knee. The next time knee in the bent position, pause there. Then with the next out breath, tip your hips. So still no side bend, still no rotation. But what we can do is we can create a little bit more space for the ribs. To do so, bring your left arm forward. Sweep it through. Remember how we worked with the breath to help mobilize the upper vertebra. Then if you remember way at the beginning, you did that seated twist with Collette. So let's bring a similar sensibility as you look inside your armpit up at the ceiling. And then inhale up and back to the front. Second side, turn your right foot in, left foot out. Match movement to breath. Exhale. Inhale. The next time knee in the bent position, let's pause there. And continuing this approach to breath, exhale, side bend. Especially as we get older, the ribs almost in a sense kind of get stuck together. So use your breathing to help create more space between the adjacent ribs. Exhale. Hold your lower ribs in connection to your belly, and then inflate your whole rib cage with the inhale. Now let's give the rib cage a little bit more space for that. Bring your right arm forward, sweep it through. Then a little itty bitty twist. What's the state of the ceiling? Same breathing. Inhale up, back to the front. Step your feet together. So we can use all the various movements to free the upper back. We can use the breath to free the upper back. So let's put some of these pieces together. Exhale, connect. Use your breathing to free up your rib cage. And because ribs connect the spine, this helps free your upper back. Maybe you're already feeling that. Now, like you did in sitting, let's do a little bit of forward flexion and continue using the breath. Now, with the exhale, bring your head back up. And with the exhale, lower ribs go down. It can almost be a sense of lengthening your sternum bone. And that's a cue I'll often use in my own practice, is to think about lengthening the sternum. Lower sternum goes down, upper sternum goes up. Now let's get the arms out of the way of the ribs. Bring them forward. Let the shoulder blades naturally broaden out to open your upper back. Exhale, arms up. Exhale, side bend right. Inhale up. Exhale, side bend left. Inhale up. First side again. Up. Second side. Up. Arms down. All right. So now let's make our way to the floor. Big deep inhale into your upper ribs. Mobilize that rib cage. Exhale, arms up. Create space for your side ribs. Inhale, mobilize your spine. We're just going to go a little bit farther than we have thus far. And exhale, crown your head forward. And then step your feet back. Yoga pose, head down dog. And then come on down. Now, a little bit earlier, Collette was sharing with you how the bridge is an inverted pose because the belly, the pelvis is higher than head and chest. Well, head down dog is similarly an inverted pose. So let's walk through some of the key points of head down dog, beginning with your hands. So in head down dog, because shoulders tend to be a little bit stiff, some of us a little bit weaker, the weight tends to go to the little finger side of the hand, which can put a lot of stress on the wrists. So the root or the base of your pointing finger, we're going to anchor that point into the floor. And so hand, anchor the root of your forefinger onto the floor. And then keep the root of the forefinger anchored as you lift your knees, draw your hips back, and then let your head hang. Same breathing here, a few deep breaths. And then come on down. So that's going to be one of our foundational points. Keep the root of the forefinger anchored. So now let's go into hands and knees and explore the positioning of the arms in head down dog. So root of the forefinger is planted, elbows a little bit bent. And if you're anything like me, when your elbow's a little bit bent, the points of your elbows tend to go off toward the side of the room. So see if you can keep your hands planted. As you rotate your arms such that the points of your elbows face more back toward your thighs. Now, what a lot of people report is when they rotate the arms, they lose the hands. When they regain the hands, they lose the elbow positioning. So explore in your body, finding their interface of roots of the forefingers planted and the tips of your elbows or the olecranon pointing more toward your thighs. Few breaths here. All right. and then releasing. Okay, so what we're going to do, you can probably see this one coming, is we're going to keep the root of the forefinger planted. We're going to keep that arm rotation. That's called external arm rotation. And then we're going to move that into head down dog. So spoiler alert, that is really hard to do because a lot of us have some muscle weakness. A lot of us have some tension up here. And so as we go into head down dog, the elbows tend to flip out, the hands tend to become unrooted, and we lose a lot of the best benefit of head down dog. So let's go through it step by step. Start first with your hands, then maintaining the rootedness of your hands, then externally rotating your arms. And keeping that external rotation of your arms, turn your toes under, lift your knees. And now let's go back really slowly, keeping your hands rooted. Best you can, maintaining the external rotation of your arms. And maybe you don't go as far back as you're used to going. So finding that inflection point where you're just starting to lose one or the other, or maybe both, and breathe there. And then come on down. All right, maybe you already noticed that by maintaining that external rotation of your arms, it opens your upper back, doesn't it? And then keeping the upper back open, having the hands planted in that very particular way, well, that's just to keep your wrists happy and healthy. So let's go ahead and explore it again. And we're going to use the breathing to help fully infuse that upper back area, the whole of the rib cage, with mobility and freedom. All right, start with your hands. Hand, hand. Then move to external rotation of your arms. Then move into head down dog. And maybe you don't go as deeply into it as you expect to or are used to, and that's okay. Then let your head hang. And in forthcoming weeks, as we move toward being inverted on the shoulders, this is a really key fundamental piece right here. A few deep breaths, freeing up your rib cage to free your thoracic spine, creating a little bit mobility, more mobility between your shoulder blades. All right, one more breath here. And come on down. So that's a lot of inversions. Let's go back onto our backs. And doing sort of a bookend approach here. So in my body, as I lie on my back, I feel naturally that my shoulder blades kind of broaden out a bit. And I can feel my upper back contacting the floor. So now as you inhale, divert the in-breath into the ribs contacting the floor. And as you divert the inhale into your back, maybe you can feel your back ribs pressing into the floor as you inhale. Maybe you can feel the back ribs broadening into the floor as you inhale. So continue using the breath in this way. As you slowly start to lift your sacrum, the very base of your spine. Then the next segment up, lumbar 5. Then the next one up, lumbar 4. And slowly raise your spine up. And continue using the breath in this way. Few more breaths. We're in an inverted pose. And especially for people working with bone density, whether osteoporosis or osteopenia, this is an approach to inversions I'm really quite fond of. So then slowly lower down. See if you can feel vertebra by vertebra, the same way you articulated segment by segment with your kitchen timer. Now that kitchen timer image, that's got a shelf life, doesn't it? Because I think we all use our phones now, don't we, to time anything. So let's try that again. So let your upper back naturally open into the floor. Use your inhale to support that spaciousness. And then slowly pick up your spine, segment by segment. And then rolling down. Then coming up to sitting. Remember trickle down economics? We're going to do a trickle down twist. So we're going to start the twist with the head and then trickle the twist down vertebra by vertebra. So let's start by turning to the right, starting with your head, highest neck segment, next one down, left hand can come across, right hand behind. And this is a really nice way to approach a twist for those of you working with bone density. Because if each segment moves just a few degrees, then you're in the free and clear to not cause harm for the bones of your spine. And if each segment contributes, let's just say, just 1 degree of rotation, over 7 plus 12 segments, that's like 20 degrees of rotation. Back in toward the middle. So let's imagine each segment contributes 1 degree. So 1 degree out of 360 degrees isn't very much, is it? So segment by segment, it's a team effort. Trickle down twist. Remember how we use the breath to free up the rib cage? Back in toward the middle. Few deep breaths. All right, let the deep breathing go. For sure, you don't want to do that kind of deep breathing as you go about your day. You end up pretty agitated if you do too much deep breathing. But it can be a nice technique to help free up the body and to help tune up the mind. All right, before we close for the day, any comments, any questions out there? All right, so thank you for the request to do inversions. What we're doing here this fall is all going to be request driven. So as ever, your feedback is really appreciated. Your requests are something we really take to heart, and we look forward to continuing this thread over the month of October. Bye-bye, everybody.